Welcome to the HR Chat Show, one of the world's most downloaded and shared podcasts designed for HR pros, talent execs, tech enthusiasts, and business leaders. For hundreds more episodes and what's new in the world of work, subscribe to the show, follow us on social media, and visit HRgazette.com.
Welcome to another episode of the HR Chat Show. Hello, listeners. This is your host today, Bill Banham. And in this episode, I'm delighted to welcome Dallas Counts, Chief Operating Officer over at VendorMint. For those who don't yet know, VendorMint specializes in helping retail suppliers recover lost revenue by managing and resolving invoice deductions, streamlining compliance, and strengthening supplier-retailer relationships. Dallas has a strong background in retail operations after years at Walmart, Sam's Club, and beyond. He's now leading operations, solution delivery, and client success at VendorMint. So in today's episode, we're going to cover everything from tariff impact and how that drives supplier and HR strategies to mindset and leadership in times of adversity, plus broader HR and people considerations in this constantly evolving retail transportation space. Dallas, how are you doing today? Welcome to the show.
Doing great, Bill. I really appreciate you having me on and excited to dive into this very complex environment that we're in and some of these great questions that you have.
Well, I appreciate your time, so thank you. Based on your work at VendorMint, Dallas, and your prior retail leadership, how would you characterize the current pressure on suppliers from tariffs, chargebacks, and operational complexities, and how does that translate into HR or people leadership consequences?
First, to kind of hop into that, let's frame up a little bit about what you talked there, the actual pressure. So, I did work at Walmart for 15 years and Sam's Club, and I was in the merchandising organization. And if you go back to when I started, which was almost 20 years ago at this point, to be a supplier, it wasn't as complicated for managing your trade and how you would manage your P&L. But today, it's very complicated. I used to ask for the lowest possible cost, but now the lowest possible cost is not the only thing you have to invest in. So as a supplier to retailers now, you have retail media that you didn't have 15 years ago. You still have your promotional and trade allowances. You're being asked for more markdowns. You're having to buy data that you didn't historically have to buy, which there's a lot more data today because of the e-com boom. And so as you look over those last 15 to 20 years, the pressures just keep mounting. And obviously in this last year, one of the biggest ones that we've had in a while is the addition of tariffs, adding additional margin pressures onto those suppliers. And so today, when you're managing your P&L, instead of only needing to look at a couple lines, you're looking at a ton of lines. And so that makes it really complicated. I would also say the addition of e-commerce in a big way has changed channel strategy quite a bit. And so when you're looking between a brick and mortar omni where they're doing online and in store, or just a digital footprint, being able to blend those lines of how you go to market is significantly more complicated. And those have added more cost to the retailers, which the retailers then ask for more price concessions from the suppliers so that they can pay for their costs as well. So it's really gotten complicated and very difficult to manage for these suppliers to work with this. And it has caused a ton of pressure. And that pressure ends up hitting the P&L. And when the P&L gets hit, obviously your leadership gets more involved in what's happening. Your finance team's more involved. So that puts pressure on your operations team. And ultimately, your HR team's going to be involved, because if all these costs keep going up and you can't figure out how to operate in that environment, there's only one lever that's easy to pull to quickly reduce costs. And that typically comes to wages, which is really complicated, right? And that's a lever that no one really wants to pull if they don't have to. And so I think during these times, leadership is just really important, and how you manage from an HR perspective can really help accelerate your company and win in the environment, or it might have the opposite impact where it could actually, hurt your culture and you might have more churn, because how you react to this pressure and how you lead through that with your teams, it will show up, right? Because under pressure, you can either turn into a diamond or you can fall apart. And ideally, we want everybody to kind of turn into that diamond and figure out how to work through that. So, I think for me, some of the principles that are just really important as leading through that from an HR versus leadership and a leadership perspective is a high degree of transparency. What do you need to accomplish for the company to be successful? And if you've been really transparent with that, and you can align your goals so that everybody is marching towards that transparency and to that goal, it can turn you more into that diamond. I think also sharing to a degree the outcome that you need to achieve as a company for success helps with the burnout and churn and blame loops. Because there is this, when you get pressure, sometimes people get defensive, and it's you start getting finger pointing. And instead of doing that, like, how do you foster that culture of learning and working together to solve the problem versus he said, she said, it's their fault, not my fault? Because everybody's worried about, if the company's under pressure, maybe my job's on the line. And so really focusing in on that transparency, very clear goals, and how you get there, I think is really, really important for the HR and leadership team. So those tariffs, adding that extra bit of pressure this last year, has really been putting suppliers through that test where they need to either turn into a diamond, or maybe they're seeing some of the cracks forming in their foundation. I don't know if that answers fully what you were asking, but I think that's kind of my lens and how I think through this.
It certainly does, and I think actually it answers the next question I was going to ask you, so I'm going to skip to the following one. But before I do that, maybe it's because I've been living under a rock or something, but I've never heard that saying before. Under pressure, you either turn into a diamond or into dust. But I really like it. I think that's cool. So I'm going to use that.
I like some good analogies. I feel like it helps with the communication to the teams.
So in companies where revenue is being lost via invoice deductions or supply chain inefficiencies, Dallas, what are the most common talent culture related root causes rather than purely technical or process causes?
Yeah, this is actually I really like this question. I haven't been asked this. I'm surprised. I think this is a really good question. So when you're looking at losses and deductions, et cetera, these teams, right? They're accounting teams, they're AR teams. These are not new teams. This is not a new division that just got stood up. These are teams that have been around since the beginning. They have practices that have been around since the beginning. And so you tend to have very tenured associates in these roles. And you tend to have a high level of scrutiny on these because they're finance, right? Like, no mistakes allowed, et cetera. And so one of the things that I see as a bit sometimes of a barrier that we need to work through with our clients is it's okay to change in this space. Many people that are in here are a little bit resistant to change. Just because it is, right? This is a very sensitive area of your business, and you're doing your invoicing and you're receiving, et cetera, of your funds. And so there's a bit of a reluctancy. And so the ones that I think are seeing some of the best success are the ones that are willing to embrace and have the conversations of how do you continue to improve this process. Many of these companies are on old systems. They're maybe migrating to a new system. So when you throw in deduction management and maybe working with a new company, it starts to get a little bit scary. Also, there's this aspect of your relationship with your retailer and how does this potentially change that? And so you see a little bit of reluctancy to want to lean in there. So if you're fostering a culture that empowers these teams to be able to work through this change, and they're not opposed to it out of the gate, and they're willing to have some conversations, we're seeing people start to realize there is opportunity to one, receive money back, but even more than that, like, one of the things that we really like to do with our companies is not just get the revenue back for them, which is a big part we do, but it's fixing problems. And the rate of technology change that has happened in the industry in the last 15 years, again, these tend to be older tenured teams that are doing these practices, is significant. And so that is often a hurdle. Is the retailer's technology has changed. How do you make sure that team is also keeping up with that technological advancement and making sure that they're not providing friction to that process? And so from a talent and culture standpoint, that's kind of what I see within this space. Some of the newer suppliers, I feel like, breeze into this because they don't have that history. But the ones that have been around for a while that have that baked in process, they're the ones where you start to see a little bit of this struggle.
I wonder, for HR pros outside of retail supply chain, so for example, services or manufacturing, what lessons from your supplier retailer context translate most strongly into their worlds, into their sectors?
The winning companies tend to really embrace that transparency, clear decision rights, and a level of discipline. And then, similar to my last question, it's embracing the new technology and leaning into it, and not being afraid that mistakes can happen there, but you can fix them, right? Like sometimes feel like you can't fix these mistakes, but they are fixable. So moving with speed into that technology embracement, one that I think is huge that actually kind of surprised I haven't said yet, AI coming into the fold, it changes a lot. And I also think, I didn't mention this in the first question, but that also changes the perception of people's fears for their job. And so I think that also is a little bit of the resiliency, kind of going back to that last question a bit is, I want to control my job. I've been here for 30 years. If I can keep AI away, it won't impact me. But it's more about how do you embrace it to make you more valuable. And so I think what stands out in some of the companies, that we're seeing really be successful here are the ones that are embracing that AI technology change. They have the clear goals. They're being very disciplined and clear decision rights as well. I think is a big one.
Okay, I can't believe we got through about 10 minutes of this conversation without mentioning AI. So thank you there for bringing it in. It seems like we can't record an episode of this show these days without
Yeah,
AI.
absolutely. I'm surprised we lasted that long as well.
So when implementing complex systems, ASNs, deduction dashboards, compliance platforms, etc. How do you approach change management and team readiness, especially with cross-functional teams, logistics, finance, AR, sales, and so on?
The big piece here, and you kind of hit on it, is change management is critical. What does change management mean? I think starting with who your audience is, internal, external, getting plain language, easy to understand objectives on what you're trying to accomplish from the outset is critical. If I'm working with an accounts receivable clerk, if she can't understand what we're trying to accomplish, and she may not be operating at the high level, then we're not going to get the buy-in and the engagement that you need in order to be successful with that change. So I think it really just starts with that, what problem we're solving, and being very clear. And again, like I like to use, maybe sounds silly, but I like to use my kids as my test subjects. If I can run something past my kids and they can understand what I'm trying to accomplish, then I feel like I've probably got a really good communication that will be received by the team. Everybody in the team, no matter what level you are, will understand the problem and what we're trying to solve and how we're trying to do it. And so, I think, again, kind of going back to that transparency and communication, just making sure it's really easy and clear for everybody to understand. From a culture perspective, that transparency, I believe, helps drive adoption. But from your onset on your hiring practices, did you hire people that are, adaptable? That adaptability characteristic is probably going to be the number one characteristic you almost need for almost any new associate. As you, again, kind of go back to AI, the world that we're moving into is going to be so vastly different than where we have been for the last, 10 years even, right? I mean, you could say 20, 30, 40, 50, but it's so different pre-COVID, COVID. Now, AI is kind of the new, generation of change, and that's going to continue. It's going to be in everything, every job role, every job function, whether it's working behind the scenes or on the front. And again, I know we waited 10 minutes, but now we're getting really deep into that. So that from a change management perspective, that very clear product launch mindset, what we're trying to accomplish, who's going to be impacted, how they're going to be impacted, how we're going to do this, the scenario training, the weekly reinforcement. So that consistency, that discipline, don't let off of that, is going to be really, really consistent. So I think the other big thing within this is, what's the feedback loop? Give the team the ability to give feedback without fear, right? Sometimes people don't feel like they get that ability to provide their feedback. You've got to give them a way to provide feedback where it's like, no question, no thought is a bad thought or a bad question. And no one's going to be upset that you asked this question. Like, everything needs to be able to be well received so that you can come back with really good answers as part of that communication and being that transparency. So I think that also provides validation for the team that's going to be impacted through that change management, which is really, really important, because if you feel validated, you get buy-in. So really that whole package around change management step by step and how you walk through that is so critical. A lot of people are scared right now that how AI is going to impact their job. Got to be transparent about this, in my opinion, up front. Don't, keep it behind the scenes and then 3 months later you impact somebody. Like, then your morale across the rest of the organization is going to take a hit because they're like, well, they said it wasn't going to impact anybody. Now it's going to impact them. And then now all of a sudden we've got those people fearing for their work, for their job, and their productivity falls. So like being very clear with what the intention is. I also think from an HR perspective, I know it's not quite part of this question, but just another general principle is we all know AI is going to impact all of our companies. The diligence on who you're hiring, what their role is, and what's the longevity of that role. I think one of the things that I try to balance with is not over hiring and maybe living under a little bit more stress in the present to help alleviate the pain of potential layoffs or other wage impacts down the line. There's balance there, but really trying to walk that line of being thoughtful, because no leader that I've ever met wants to impact a person, right? Like they don't want to do that. So really putting the stress on who are we hiring, what is their role, how has that evolved in the next 3, 6, 12 months with the new changes that are coming in our industries.
Okay, very good. I've got an image in my mind now of you standing in front of your kids, presenting on the latest and greatest of deduction dashboards. I don't think I don't think my 5-year-old son would sit around and listen to my musings. One thing that you mentioned there was the feedback piece. For someone to truly feel safe giving feedback, does that feedback need to be anonymous?
You give them the election of how they can do it. If they want to do it anonymous, give them the ability to do it anonymous. Absolutely. I think that's a key opportunity. And maybe if they don't, they don't. And, so I agree, like that anonymous aspect is really important in that feedback loop, because not everybody's going to feel comfortable, raising their hand and being seen by everybody, especially depending on how big or small your organization is. Like that definitely changes things. But I think giving them the ability to submit anonymous feedback is really important.
Okay, very good. We are flying through these questions today. Next up, with the continual change in retailer policies such as on-time deliverables and external factors like tariffs, how do you recommend that HR leaders build agility into their workforce and org design?
You always have a set of skills or soft skills or core competencies that you see within an individual. And I think historically we've had a set of those. I don't know that those necessarily change, but maybe emphasis on certain ones has risen more than it used to. That adaptability that we talked about earlier, I think is critical in that we are going to be in a state of change permanently from here on out. We've been talking about change for decades, but it's just speeding up. It just keeps speeding up. Technology advancement keeps speeding up. The industry keeps speeding up. There's new ways that you're in our world that you're engaging with the customer, whether you're the retailer or you're the supplier, whether that's through media, how you're appearing there, or it's the way someone's shopping. It continues. We have drone delivery. I'm here in Bentonville, Arkansas, and some things that I order from Walmart, they get dropped into my yard via a drone. Like I never in my lifetime would I have thought, in the last 20 years that's something that we'd see. So this rate of change just continues to evolve. If you go out to the east or west coast and you have the Waymos and like you're riding in cars that nobody's there. I've talked to my son about he may not even drive a car. My daughter is currently driving, so that's a whole story in itself. But building that agility really starts from, are you hiring the people that allow you to have the agility? And it's not something that every candidate's going to have. There's varying abilities, adaptability, and agility, and being able to move. Some people want stability in a lot of those jobs where they just come in and punch the clock and get to work the same thing from 9 to 5. That's rapidly changing. There's not a lot, because most of those roles are going to be impacted by technology in a way. So that adaptability to learn new skills is going to be important from the person that's hiring to the person that's applying. I think to the audience that's listening that maybe is looking at how do they think about the workforce they're entering it, whether they've been in it or they're new into it. The ability to pivot and make changes and understand your skill set, learn something new, lean into a new technology is going to become even more pivotal than it's ever been. When I was hired, I used to put things like I'm proficient in Microsoft and PowerPoint and maybe some specialty systems. the number one proficiency going forward is going to be AI. Are you proficient in AI? Do you know how to use AI? Do you know how to lean into AI? That's going to become one of the things that's going to be critical. So I think then within that, you hire those, that helps you start to build that culture of agility because you've got the right people that are able to move. And then we go back into a little bit of that trust and transparency lens of where are you moving, how are you going to get there, what are you going to be leaning into, those clear priorities. Again, that technology aspect really impacts people, but I don't think tariffs are going away, right? So we've I think that's something that's probably here to stay. Whether it's the president or Congress or whoever that is the ones enacting them, going forward, that's going to be a political stance from here on out. And our evolution with our surrounding countries, as the United States, or you're another country, if you're living anywhere, like tariffs are going to become a bigger conversation for everybody, and really shape the global dynamic. And so I think that's going to continue to be a big piece. And so that's going to require flexibility, and that stems all the way down to, if we get out of the software conversation, to manufacturing. So from an operations perspective, like where do I have my manufacturing facilities? Are they onshore, offshore? If I'm a textile company, what are the different areas that you can have textiles? There's areas that specialize, whether you're in the Middle East versus over in the Asian countries. That ability to think more dynamically is going to be critical, and you might have to make some really tough decisions in order to stay competitive. So there's that agility and ability to move even within your general operations that historically, like, you could have a manufacturer for 30 years and not have to worry about it. Now you're having to worry more about how you're sourcing, where you're sourcing from, and then your retail partners. They're moving faster. They're sourcing new suppliers faster. They're sourcing new capabilities faster. So there's this level of agility that you need to have, even on your operators and how they're looking and working within their environments. So that, again, kind of going back to that ability to really adapt to new environments, I just think is going to be, I can't stress enough. I'm really honed in on that one. Obviously, there's so many core features of an individual that you should be looking at, but I think for the sake of this conversation, that adaptability is so important for your associate and your culture.
And I would love to continue talking about approaches, why adaptability is great, mindsets of leaders. You said something to me earlier on, which I really respect, which was, I would rather take on a bit more work than hire someone new and then let them down because AI is coming and they would take their jobs anyway. So fully respect that. So I had all these other things I wanted to chat to you about. However, we're pretty much out of time. Before we do wrap up today, though, how can folks connect with you? So is that LinkedIn, email, Instagram, whatever you want to share there? And of course, how can they learn more about VendorMint?
Yeah, absolutely. Great questions. So if you want to connect with me, feel free to hit me up on LinkedIn. There's not a lot of people with the name Dallas Counts out there, so you're not going to be filtering through a bunch. So feel free to hit me up there. Also, my email is pretty simple. It's dallas@vendermint.com. Happy to source there as well. And then for VendorMint, you can reach out to me. You can go to our website. We've got a great AI that's also enabled there that can connect you with the right internal people if you're looking for some more specific help, or you can connect to anybody through our VendorMint LinkedIn. We've got a great list of associates that are on there as well that you can connect with. So a lot of different ways. Whatever your preferred method is, feel free, and we will get with you and we will help you through your whatever challenges you may have.
Excellent. And as always, there will be links in the show notes and in the article on the HR Gazette, listeners. So fear not if you didn't jot those down just now. And yeah, it is a great name, Dallas. I feel like you missed an opportunity to be a newscaster or something with a name like that. It's fantastic.
That's never too late.
Never too late. You're right. But that just leaves me for today to say thank you very much for joining me on the show.
Appreciate it. Thanks for having me, Bill. This was a lot of fun.
And listeners, as always, until next time, happy working.
Thanks for listening to the HR Chat Show. If you enjoyed this episode, why not subscribe and listen to some of the hundreds of episodes published by HR Gazette? And remember, for what's new in the world of work, subscribe to the show, follow us on social media, and visit hrgazette.com.